My dad is the reason someone is probably terrified to go into the woods at night. One night my dad was the creep, and now there are about 10 teenagers in Czech that are terrified of the woods at night, although they were douches, so it's alright. Let me explain. I go to school in the US, but all of my extended family lives in the Czech Republic. Every year that we go back, my uncles and aunts throw a party for us in their mountain house. This house is up in the mountains, very secluded from the other houses. One night, we were all sitting outside around a campfire, and our neighbors, albeit quite far, were being ridiculously loud. They're Czech, aka they're drunk, yelling, swearing, shooting off firecrackers, the works. My cousin had just put her toddler down to sleep and was worried that they would wake him up, so my dad decides to walk over to ask them to be quiet. My dad was really polite about it, and they seemed apologetic, so my dad left and returned to our campfire. Naturally, in about 10 minutes, they were just as loud, this time yelling things to us, telling us not to be party poopers, shooting firecrackers in our direction, that we were jealous we weren't having as much fun, blah blah blah. After about 10 minutes of them not dying down, my dad decides to take action. My dad is 6'6" and 230 pounds of pure muscle. He was an athlete, so he's in incredible shape and just a very imposing man. He takes his shirt off and puts on this mask that my uncle just so happened to have laying around. This mask was human-faced, but it was very distorted and really creepy. He goes to the shed, takes the axe, and decides he's gonna scare these drunk assholes. The property that they were on is shaped like a square, with dense forest completely covering the outskirts. Their fire was right in the middle. My dad slowly walks from the forest, but never ventures further towards the camp, and simply slowly walks the perimeter, swinging the axe and staring at the fire. We heard the drunk guy screaming and swearing, and my dad came back laughing, saying that he had never seen teenagers run that quickly. Not surprisingly, the rest of the trip in the mountain house was peaceful, without the noise of our drunken teenage neighbors. Probably because they were too busy locked in their house, shitting themselves. Sorry if there are errors, English isn't my first language. What I found in my dad's tackle box. I should start this by saying that my biological father has been dead for some time. In fact, he committed suicide soon after this incident I'm about to describe. My parents were married for 16 years and has dated through high school. In fact, they were a trophy couple, as in, they were homecoming king and queen. My mom was a librarian but was elected county clerk when I was 14 years old. My dad was the night manager at the local Walmart. We live in a house that has a creek nearby, and on the nights that my dad was off, he would go down there and fish rather than sleep, because it was easier to keep sleeping during the daytime. When I was 15, I started smoking cigarettes. Don't judge, I've quit. One Saturday, I was desperate for a smoke. I knew that my dad kept a few packs in his fishing tackle box, and since he was asleep, I slept down to the basement where he kept the box. I had no idea what I was in for. The box had a lock on it that could only be opened with a key. Being the sneaky little jerk I am, I had snatched the key from his room. I opened the box. I can still remember the click of the key. My first thoughts were, sweet, I can have a cigarette now. For those who smoke, the thought of smoking is actually better than doing it. Inside were several instant developed photos. For those who don't know what I'm talking about, these were actual cameras that flashed and the photos slipped right out. Anyways, the first one I saw showed my dad standing over a horse. He was holding a bloody machete, and I saw quite clearly that the poor animal was cut open. There were several photos like that for various farm animals. Our house was near farms. I almost threw up right then and there. To this day, I still get sick thinking about it. But the murdered farm animals weren't the only things I saw. There's photos of my father wearing lingerie, handcuffed to beds, with writings on his body in lipstick. The writing was very obscene stuff. There were others with him wearing S&M outfits, and one showed him with a very young girl that still horrifies me to this day. She was completely naked, with chains around her neck, with my father in SM. I had no idea what to do. I decided to call my mother, who was at her office. I told her I needed her there immediately. She knew I was serious, so she got home quickly. My dad was still asleep. I took her downstairs and showed her the photos. We left the house and went to her sister's that very day. The police were called, and they discovered that my dad had been having an affair with a 19-year-old S&M fetish enthusiast who was also the one who took the photos of him in the lingerie. He pled guilty to the animal cruelty charges and hung himself the first night in prison. But that's not the end of it. When my aunt, his adopted sister, heard what happened, I can still remember how she looked. Her skin went completely white, and I thought she was having a heart attack. She told my mother that he was caught torturing animals when he was younger, and she had caught him going through her underwear. She even said that she once woke up to him masturbating over her bed. Luckily, that's all over. My mom married a good guy who's hopefully not a complete perv. It's been 20 years, but I can still remember the shock when I opened the tackle box. Late Father's Day, WTF. So, I work as a delivery driver for a local Chinese takeaway, and one of the places I frequently deliver is an assisted living nursing home. So, I got the order for this lady. I rock up at the nursing home, and after going through an electric gate approach the reception, I push the buzzer to alert the nurse that I am in the lobby, and shortly after a man comes out. It quickly becomes clear from a strange sense about him that he is not a nurse, but in fact, one of the patients. "Hey, I've got a takeaway for Sue. Have you seen her about?" I asked the man casually. "Food?" the man replies. "Yeah, takeaway for Sue." "What takeaway is it?" he presses. "It's Chinese, but it's not for you, it's for Sue," I reply, sensing where this is going. "I'm hungry," the man states. I push the reception buzzer again. "It's not for you, it's for Sue," I reiterate. The man takes a step towards me and starts saying, "Come in and have some food with your dad. Come in and have some food with your dad," over and over. This man is not my father. I take a step back, and he takes 2 steps closer, so he's right up in my face, still uttering the phrase, "Come in and have some food with your dad." The man had a deranged, lost look on his face, which is quite alarming. I start backing away to my car, and he starts following to the point that I actually had to break into a run. I make it to my car, and thankfully during the chase, he's lost interest and I shook him. About a minute later, I go to reception again, push the buzzer, and make the delivery. Then on the way out, I am accosted by another guy. Here we go again, I think to myself. The man comes up to me, again rather close, and in a low growl of voice opens with, "My name hadn't been invented before I was born." Half intrigued, half apprehensively, I say, "What's your name?" "My name is Michael," he responds. I try not to crack up. I get in the car and drive back, having done my most messed up delivery yet. When I get back to the Chinese, I complain and say I don't ever want to go back because the first man was genuinely scary. But in reality, I go there way more now than I ever did. Never been as bad as that, though. My birth father. A couple months ago, I got an email from my Muslim who lived in Fort McMurray, Alberta formerly. There's been a huge wildfire that destroyed most of the city. He had gotten a call from my great aunt, who I'd never met, and told me that my birth father wanted to make contact. To explain things better, I was adopted at birth by my parents, who had waited 10 years and had 3 other failed adoptions. I've grown up with a basically normal, happy life. I say basically because my biological family has a history. It's an open adoption, so over the years, I've had arranged visits with my birth mother, my birth grandparents, Kukum and Mozum, and recently met my biological aunt and uncle. But my birth father, he's the whole other story. I never met the guy personally, and I honestly don't want to. As the stories go, he was a friend of one of my 3 uncles, and coincidentally 3 years younger than my birth mother. Both did drugs for a time and drank excessively. They never really bonded as the story goes, but he, Curtis, was apparently infatuated with my mother. There are several parts to the story, but I'll focus more on the significant parts, such as my conception. My mother had come back to her hometown after several months away, and a friend threw a party in a local Boston pizza bar. She only drank socially at the time, and my birth father was there. By the end of the night, he had walked her back to her apartment and, well, he took advantage of her drunken stupor. 3 months later, when she couldn't hold down alcohol or coffee and marijuana didn't help, she took a test and learned she was pregnant with me. My birth father learned this and became distant, instantly refusing to take any part in my life. My birth mother had support though, despite her financial situation, and decided to put me up for adoption. I'm so glad she did. The reason for me typing this is after my birth father requested to see me, I told my parents my Muslim's message and they started freaking out. They told me why a few minutes later. Apparently, when I was 2 years old, my birth father came to our house. We had recently adopted Tiny, and ironically named Newfoundlander, who was gentle but still protective of our family. When he showed up, Tiny apparently couldn't stop growling. Dad wasn't sure at first who he was, and I was downstairs watching TV away from sight. My birth father told him, my dad, that he had to come take me, and he had gotten a court set up and ready to get custody rights for me. He reeked of beer and seemed high on something. My dad refused to let him come inside. My mom, downstairs in the laundry room, saw him and immediately rushed over to the den and made me hide in my closet. She didn't want him to find me if he forced his way inside. Meanwhile, my birth father kept insisting to come inside, but my dad threatened to call the police if he tried anything. He wouldn't let him see me until he had an official court document and told him to get off our property. Mom, being a friggin' hero, opened the back door for Tiny so she could get into the porch. Dad says that after Tiny raced over growling and barking, my birth father ran off into his truck and sped away. He called the police shortly after, because he'd seen a holster on my birth father's hip with a gun inside. 2 weeks later, my biological father was arrested for illegal drug possession and distribution, illegal arms dealings related to gangs, and a slew of other charges that landed him in prison for a decade. What's scary though is, inside his truck, they found a gun, duct tape, stuffed animals, and a few photographs of me, taken when I was playing outside in the backyard. I was 12 when he was released, but he never tried to see me. He went to see my birth mother though and asked where I was. When she refused, he threatened her, and she only gave him a photograph of me from our last visit at my 10th birthday. He started to cry and left her alone after that. I'm pleased to say that he never tried to get in contact with me after I told Muslim, and I wasn't ready, and the message was relayed to him, and I probably won't be for a few more years. He's apparently married and living outside of Canada, or at least far from my province. After all, I don't think anyone would really be up for meeting with a guy who tries to stalk you and, in a way, kidnap you. So, to my birth father, let's not meet, at least not for a very, very long time. Update. I want to thank everyone who's commented since I posted this a few days ago. This was a really huge event for me, as I never knew how close I was to danger when I was little. I want to clarify a few things over some messages I got. 1. Yes, my Muslim and birth father are related. My Muslim is technically my birth mother's stepfather. My actual biological grandfather is not presently around, and third cousins to my birth father. So technically, we're still weirdly biologically related. No, I don't know where my birth father is at the moment. Rumor has it he's in Newfoundland, or has since moved out of the country, which is hard for an ex-convict to do, so I think he's still in Canada. Yes, I am well aware that what the man has attempted, but I want to make it known now. We both share a similar neurological disorder, and if it wasn't for my parents' guidance and restraint, I could have ended up like him. But he was also deeply traumatized by his father's death in a mining accident as a kid, and other events and factors, such as his mental health going away, that caused him to go that far. If anything, aside from distrust and dislike, I pity him overall. Lastly, and yes, my Cookham and Musum were at one point millionaires. Not really now, however. They can afford nice things and a lot of vacations abroad, but they still worked. My Cookham is a social worker and psychologist. She actually diagnosed me with my disorder, and my Musum is a retired handyman. They didn't win the lottery, Max. If I manage to remember the name of the lottery they won from, I'll add it in. That's all I want to make known. In September, I will be turning 18 years old, so I will update if I do manage to track down any of my birth family or my sister. Sorry if this update isn't creepy, but more so for clarity's sake. Thank you all again. Update later. Update 2. In the meantime, since my last update, I've met my birth mother's new husband Alec, who's a really great guy, and their child, my baby brother Jackie. He's only a few months old. Also, I want to inform you that my account was hacked by an ex-friend who thought she was being funny. I've since removed that content and sincerely apologize. But on to what happened. My great-grandfather, the man who raised my birth father, just passed away. He wanted to see me before he died, but before I could get permission to go, with my parents accompanying me, he passed on. Apparently, Curtis showed up too. He thought I was going to come and was waiting for me. I'm still a good 8 to 14 weeks away from being a legal adult, so I'm still not too keen on meeting him. So sadly, I did not attend. I also wanted to bring in more information that I've discovered. At the funeral, Curtis brought his new wife, a woman who I will not name. They don't have any kids as far as I know, but due to his past, she's not very fond of my birth mother, who has since had 2 other children, my half-sister Allie and now Jackie, or me. Why? She was adopted too, but it was closed. She also had very bad, nasty parents who are and were against sex before marriage, so my birth mother is basically seen as a harlot in their eyes or something. I was apparently brought up at the funeral, and Curtis' wife got very apprehensive towards me, claiming that I was a mistake and didn't deserve to know any of my family to begin with, and should have been aborted or the adoption should be closed, so Curtis didn't have this shame. I'm considered the black sheep of my birth family too, I will add now. Some relatives are convinced that my existence should not be known. Curtis stayed quiet the whole time. His wife badmouthed me and my birth mother until Cookham had it, and told her off for treating me like shit when I did want to attend, but didn't want to see the man that almost abducted me. Needless to say, that shut her up, especially since she claimed that I was the problem that got Curtis into jail just before. Yeah, my family relations aren't so great. I love my birth mother a lot, but I never got such an angry phone call from her before until recently after the funeral. This is basically how I found out all of this stuff. Luckily, I'm not emotional enough to get super bugged about all of this, but it's a real nuisance to know that I have a woman who's 100% against me, only because I was conceived through sexual assault, and Curtis changed since then. And also that, despite this, Curtis is out of prison and nearby. I've been kind of on edge since the funeral was in a city 4 hours away, and if someone let it slip where I was, he may go to try and meet me. It's been a couple days, but nothing, so I think I'm in the clear. Nonetheless, I will update if something else happens. Sorry that this update isn't exactly creepy, but I do find it unnerving to have this guy and woman too close for comfort. Hopefully, things will be alright.